Hey there, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. Before the video starts, I want to let you know that if you like it, to leave a like and a comment down below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel and click the little bell icon to be up to date with my latest content, as well as joining the notification squad or wolfification squad like this pack legend here. Thanks for your support, and enjoy the video. Starvicers, Feed the Soul. Chapter 6. Maddening. With murmurs laced with whispered curses, the woman made weighty, steady steps towards the cellar door, her hands gripping the handle of a 5-gallon-sized red bucket. Putting the full, durable plastic pail down, Summer eased her back as she craned her head in all directions. With no signs of the Velcro tortoiseshell, she was confident enough to enter the acoustic-proof surrounded door. Once the entrance was briefly opened and the bucket was on the second step, the Wendigo resumed his roaring. Summer was amazed that Ben had waned his unruly, unnerving noises when he was alone. But she guessed that even a cursed cryptid being needed to rest his vocal cords now and again. When the woman readied to restart the heavy lifting, while trying to remind herself to bend her knees, the corner of her eye caught the closed exit's doorknob jiggling to and fro. From the tiny, clasping claws trying in vain to gyrate the knob. Summer respired roughly, knitting her eyebrows in aggravation. Apparently, not ever allowing her cat to come down to the cellar had no effect on conditioning her not to make an effort. Although the tortoiseshell eventually had relented whenever her owner did the wash or was busy with workouts, she was dead set to restart cracking at it tonight. Now, Nosy Posy comes out of hiding to get down here with Ben shrieking. Summer let out a scoff as she carried on with her task. Crazy-ass cat. Every heaving, lowering step on the wooden stairs brought the tentative woman painfully closer to the deafening sounds. Ben's howls were more intense and frantic. It must have been from what she was conveying towards him. The closer the scent, the more agitated the ravening roars developed. And dear God, was it ear-piercing. While she was upstairs, Summer had acquired earplugs. She could still hear, of course, but the little buds managed for her head to stop feeling as if it were being splintered into tiny, sharp, shattering shards. Hissing between clenched teeth, Summer cautiously trudged downwards, and with more curses. Shit, this was work. The contents within the bucket weighed over 100 fucking pounds. She would know. She weighed the edible payload by standing on her bathroom scale. Incredibly, it survived. But Summer's preparations made her primed to do this. Glancing at the exercise equipment at the lower left corner of her cellar as she moved, made the woman appreciate her compulsive daily aerobics, plus the hefty hand weights, and for her isolated residence, with a soundproofing basement and unbreakable silver-plated chains, not to mention the in-use earplugs and the dedicated substance within the heavy-ass pail. Summer shook her head. Jesus, her almost decade of well-thought planning of this insanity was insane. After a few more moments, which seemed like hours to the struggling, resilient woman, she and her multiple times hauled container had finally reached the final, creaking wooden stair. And as she had done before, slowly approached Ben until she was mostly halfway out of his talons and tongue's grasp. Summer placed the bucket at her periwinkle slippers and straightened herself up, hands resting on the small of her tensed back. When the woman's tired eyelids reopened after a wipe of her damp brow, she gawked at the wailing Wendigo and hopped back one pace. All of this presented unattainable meat was driving the famished cryptid absolutely wild. His hysterical howling was pitched higher and hoarser. His snapping fangs were slavering like mad, while animalistic albino eyes seemed to become a shade redder. He was thrashing with manacles and binds being pulled for all their worth. Even his erratic, sharp shadow, being casted from the overhead fluorescent lamp, gave the appearance to have life of its own, as it outreached in frenzied unison with its manic possessor. After the intimidated woman had composed herself to get accustomed to the savage scene, she took notice of the beast lunging directly for the big canister. His sniffing nostrils flared as he panted from the vapor rising from the warm, familiar, yet tantalizing new smell. The meaty concoction's aroma scented through the heavy air of the basement, which depleted a bit of the death musk emitted from Ben, and for that, Summer's own nose was quite thankful for. As the nervy woman watched the Wendigo reaching for the bucket in sheer ferocity, her tongue partly moistened her parched lips, because the next move was utterly chancy as hell. Getting the food to the Wendigo without becoming food for the Wendigo. A tranquilizer gun couldn't be acquired, and food-baited oral medication would be unpredictable, since the beast instantly recovered after being injected with strongly concentrated narcotics to comatose 10 people. The bucket was too heavy and had no angles to push properly. Consequently, doing so with smaller pail portions at a time would only put herself in constant danger from Ben's fervent impatience. She had canned the idea of tossing morsels one at a time. The woman wanted this done before her curls go gray. However, when Summer had toiled with the bucket's contents, she had created this maneuver in her mind countless times. Nevertheless, it definitely was edgy-ass insane. "Ben?" she yelled out between his callous caterwauling. "Hey, Ben!" Ironically, the woman wanted his attention on her. When the Wendigo's peripheral vision discerned the calling prey that withheld his meat, his pinprick pupils nearly consumed his irises from the sight of the proverbial stinging weapon back in his prey's tiny talons. The beast recoiled, learning it was fruitless to try chewing himself free from the silver binds and bolts. He kept low to the concrete with ears flattened, neck fur raised between his metallic collar, and his muzzle twitching from much angry apprehension. Regardless of Ben's submissiveness, it doubly wasn't enough for Summer. She was too experienced with how brisk the cryptid's movements were from his recent endeavored tackling. The woman needed more life insurance. Foregoing an apology as her words were irrelevant to her cursed beloved, she held the stun gun higher, aimed its green laser sight, and squeezed. As the line sparked and crackled, the yelping beast cringed flat on the ground. However, his torso was still in a tightened torpor, for the shocking lines were not attached to him, but the old love seat in the bottom right corner of the pastel-painted wall. While stepping out of her slippers, Summer tugged the stashed handkerchief free from her denim's back pocket and wrapped it next to the taser's trigger. The woman's narrow stare relaxed when she regarded Ben's compacted posture. To see the distressed, gaunt giant that was her husband, constructing himself to be as small as possible with large hands draped over his eyes, and to hear his startled yaps reduced into worried whimpers. "Attention, Summer! Do it now before your chow!" With a solid blink and held in breath to avoid detection, the woman laid the active stun gun down, grabbed the bucket with a suppressed groan, and silently rushed forward. She placed the jam-packed pail before Ben and bounded back to the stun gun, lastly allowing herself to gulp much-wanted air. When the sizzling sounds ended, Ben parted two spindly clawed fingers from his face to find the weapon being collected by his resolute prey. With hungry growls, he glared warningly. The woman returned the stun gun to her torn winter apparel, holding up empty hands. "See? The tasers." The Wendigo lurched and seized the bucket with a guttural snarl, making Summer's breath hitch. All gone. Ben's lanky limbs were coiled around the pail like a rat snake on a rodent. She expected him to eat instantaneously. Despite being cooked, the taste of his compulsory food should be quite right. It had to be. Summer tilted her head in conjunction with the curious pout. This was strange. It looked as if Ben was totally torturing himself. He was breathing in the steamy mixture while groaning. His shrunken underside gurgled more voluble than his throat. "Come on, Ben," muttered the expectant woman. It's right fucking there! But the craving, cadaverous cryptid kept jerking his head akin to a rabid, thirsty animal that was anxious for water. He was recalling something bad about eating his meat. Summer bowed her head. Of course he was. Ben was battling between two evils, the pang of carnivorous hunger or the pure dread of the growth pain that surely follow. Staying in her safe spot, Summer hunched over her knees so she was shorter than the hunkered down Wendigo. Why in the world? Her hemorrhaging heart decided to make her look even more vulnerable. Her common sense didn't have a goddamn clue! Benny, baby. The food-focused priest was apathetic as usual. Regardless, the woman's soft, raspy voice had taken a direct, hushed tone. It's okay. It won't hurt you. I promise. Still fastened to the bucket, Ben began to sway side to side in a short, tight session. Please, baby. You're starving. You need to feed. The Wendigo didn't yield with his hated procrastination, nor his fervent drooling. For Christ's sake, men! Summer unbent her knees. Her patience was wearing almost as thin as he was. And seeing the extensive salivation, returned her sock-covered feet into her slippers to keep her footing. Please eat before you flood the basement into another great lake. She waited. No change in Ben's hesitant behavior. A famished moan escaped his watering maw. Feeling afflicted herself, Summer ran her hands down her face, tugging down her bottom eyelids. He wanted his meat so damn badly, but also wanted to avoid the repercussions from human consumption. This curse. Summer groaned to no one in particular as she scanned her cellar. This stupid fucking curse. She pursed in thought when her raking sights stopped at the far right corner of the cellar. Well, fuck you, curse! Scared but annoyed, Summer marched along the rear wall, still out of range from the sensitive, hind-sighted cryptid. She grabbed the lengthy broomstick that was beside the folding lounge chair and briskly moved to where she had previously stood. The woman stooped down and proceeded to pretend to poke the bucket part way. All while doing so, grumbled incoherently and was showing her top gap teeth, more or less resembling some sort of big crazed rabbit. The beast slightly raised his views from his food-holding cylinder, slanting his head and squinting eyelids, making Summer to slit her own. Was he actually being cynical of her imposing actions? Ben emitted a short, higher-toned gruff which ended with a snort. Summer surmised it was the Wendigo equivalent of, really? With a puff of hot breath, Summer mocked another half-swipe as she growled and hissed, making the rumbling beast tense up. A woman was provoking a giant, anorexic, antlered werewolf in her basement by pretending to take away his meal. She could sense the figurative smirk and lifting eyebrow of her contemptuous conscience. Well, so much for not trying to piss off Lady Luck again. Eh, March Hare? The desperate woman matched Ben's heated glare. Hurry up and eat, or I'm going to put this person into my person. She took the end of the broom's pole and let its straw bristles finally bump Ben's precious pail, raising her lips widely. And with the woman's pronounced yell, literally at the end of his tether, the Wendigo socked his false adversary's straw claws away and plunged his entire face up to the base of his dark ivory horns, into the depth of the copious contents. Summer stood up, gawking at the half of the broomstick which had become just a stick at this point, and tossed it to the concrete. It was for the best that she didn't attempt the foolish first idea of pushing the bucket to him. The risk of ending up like her poor, hand-me-down granny broom was too high. And if anything was spilled, the primal drive of the greedy cryptid of wanting it all and not being able to consume it all would have made him madder than she was. And while Summer intently observed the beast gorging with the chomping and slurping outpassing the effects of the earplugs, a rare, hopeful expression allayed her wary features. It's working. With the purring cat in tow, Summer stood in the middle of her large kitchen. The once clear and neat eatery room looked like a restaurant that was catering to a grand-scale wedding celebration. Bowls, pans, and immeasurable ingredients next to printed-out menus were displayed on just about every available leveled surface, including the dining room's table. After placing Posey on one of the kitchen island stools, Summer let her ripped winter outerwear drape over the other. She decided not to put the taser in another coat, and also avoided stitching the new sweater. The woman liked the constant visual aids to watch her step. Literally. Returning the earplugs to her pocket, she walked over to the food-filled kitchen counter. Another 5 gallons red bucket was next to it. Unhooking her thumbs and rolling up her battered orange sweater sleeves, Summer arranged to add another vast serving of stew. However, she released the dripping spoon into one of the low-simmering pots with an audible plop. Summer's buckling legs were spent, and so was she. Sitting on the tiles, the exhausted woman needed a breather, for her adrenaline had dropped to her toes. The 9 years of preparation wasn't enough for her nerves. Similar to back when Ben had dared them to go bungee jumping over that scary-ass bridge. There were professionals and safety gear all around, and before they went on vacation, Summer had hyped herself for weeks for it. But once they were there, she backed down the moment she peered at the distant waters below. Her life partner was humble about the decline and told his fiancée, no pressure. But she still had to wash his car with a swimsuit on. The woman's reminiscent smile stonewashed when tonight's events retook her mind. Everything she was bearing was just so goddamn fucking overwhelming. How many times would she risk her life if she only had 9 Mommy? Posey had left her seat and was at her owner's caulking calves, squeakily trilling and sniffing the new, strong smell that was always existent now. With forehead pressed into her knees, the wilted woman extended a shaky arm and stroked the empathetic feline. But Posey knew that wouldn't be enough. The determined domestic shorthair squeezed herself under the folded arms and into the scrunched-up legs of her trembling owner until they were nose to nose. And as soon as Summer lifted her chin, Posey cheek rubbed interminable. Ultimately winning over, the woman embraced her torty teddy bear, repaying the affection by nuzzling the cat's brown, tubby underbelly. And as Posey's purr intensified, Summer's motions became unperturbed. Thank you, Posey. The cat gently bopped her owner's nose with a trill. I always got you, Mommy. The end of the woman's lips elevated lightly. She was never so indebted to her dearly devoted little friend. While playing Algonquin roulette, it was supportive to have the companionship to aid her mentality with remaining stable. Mostly. That was relatively the reason she had kept Posey free-ranged in the home with all this hectic madness. On the other hand, this March hare adored her dormouse as much as family. The bubbling cat licked her knuckles, slowly blinking in harmony with Summer's calming pulse rate. No, Posey was family. So before her next trip to the Wendigo Den, the selfless woman would sacrifice and put her heart's furry crutch safely in the master bedroom. After a couple minutes of petting, Summer regained her upright balance and granted her lips a quick glass of water before she collected the large serving spoon and returned to the task at hand. And while Summer scooped and poured the rest of the meaty-looking components, her thoughts went back to the cellar, when she marveled Ben devouring her plan with relish. I still can't believe it. The woman couldn't help but giggle a bit maniacally at the surreal situation. She momentarily pondered about her mythical studies might succumb her to Wendigo psychosis. After being exposed to the mind-altering cryptid, the prey becomes easier to hunt from losing their stability. Summer shrugged her shoulders, unconcerned of any truth behind that. She'd already lost it years ago, and tonight her strategy was a shining example of being unbelievably zany. Because what the Wendigo was ingesting wasn't human, or was ever alive. She used the media and luckily, and strangely enough, had found out how human flesh could oddly taste like pork and overcooked veal. Summer figured if she formulated the textured gluten, soy, and vegetable protein to imitate his prey, the spirit would allow Ben to indulge without rejection. Presently, she was using some kind of vegan meat called seitan, and this gravy-marinated, spiced, human flesh-flavored food was irresistible to the depleted, desperate cryptid. He was also swallowing the included potatoes whole. Summer calculated that Ben considered the starchy part of the human was gut content, and she made sure to use red-colored buckets to hold his food. Wendigos were keen on consuming the most caloric parts first, and were instinctually attracted to the shade of blood. The woman grimaced with a sudden shudder. Man, she really did loads of disgustingly gruesome research. Ben had always admired Summer's culinary skills, but it was the first time she was cooking completely meatless. Granted, she was never a big fan of beef and poultry, but the woman was far from being a vegetarian. She loved her seafood and the occasional treat of a bacon and egg breakfast, which had originally made her consider using real pork or venison to imitate human prey. However, Summer didn't want to take any gambles with those cards. She was troubled that Ben had already tasted wild boar or fawn, of which were probably similar, and had made him sick. Summer hummed restlessly. Would the seitan do the same to his unexplainable digestion? But Ben had already finished a quarter of the meatless meat without the urge to vomit before she retreated upstairs. With another hasty huff, Summer put down the lost count empty pot and shifted to another full one. Fuck with being rational. Right now, everything was fucking irrational. Besides, Ben's affliction was caused by a mythical spirit, not some accurate virus or infection. Furthermore, if it works, simply don't question it. After a couple minutes of dripping, the uptight woman let out a louder laugh, startling her faithful feline. Summer cleared her throat as she scraped the pot of any edible remnants. Sorry, Posy. I was just thinking that I'd gotten Ben to eat because I said snarl. Not understanding nor caring about the failing of proper predator lingo, Posy was more interested in her owner's yummy edibles and politely pawed and mewed like a small deflating balloon. Please, Mommy? With a roll of her amber orbs, Summer took Posy's stuck claw free from her stretched denims and scooped a sample into the awaiting cat's bowl. Summer blinked at Posy, lapping the gravy up as if it were heavy cream. The little eager eater had tested this mix beforehand and never turned her little pink nose away. Maybe it's why the cat had often woke Summer up by nibbling on her toes. Hence, if her carnivorous pet couldn't resist it, neither would a Wendigo. And she was right, for Ben was well nigh wolfing it down, inhaling it, loving it. After several crocks were emptied, the second helping was ready, and Summer hoisted the bucket by the door to have it all set for the big, cursed cryptid detained with chains below in her basement. Weightlifting practice or not, the woman's back was pleading for her to be careful, and so did the last of her remaining saneness.